This is going to be an overview of pretty much everything Microsoft offers. I've weighted it so that the more traditional programs are up at the top. And then we're going to kind of blitz through the ones that nobody's ever heard of that are primarily useful for businesses. And by businesses, I mean a bunch of them are useful for small businesses, and then some of them are basically only useful for Fortune 500 companies and above. But it is nice that you're able to get all of this in one package. Before Microsoft did this, there are definitely alternatives, and I kind of have the names of some of the alternatives underneath during the presentation. But some of these had alternatives, as I said, but they didn't talk well with each other. So one of the benefits of being in the Microsoft ecosystem is that all of these products, all of these programs, all these applications all talk to each other and they all work together very well. Whereas previously you would kind of get, 3 or 4 different programs, but then you would have to switch data between them manually in order to get everything you wanted. Of course, the big negative with Microsoft is the price, and we'll go over the price first. So as always, if you have a question, feel free to write it in the chat, or we will stop at certain points and people can ask questions and you'll be asked to unmute. And then as we go through this, if you have any questions that you want kind of a deeper answer to, you can ask those at the end. And then if you have any requests for a specific program that we mentioned here today, for like a class to be on that specific program or application, let Mary know and we can put that together. As a frank disclosure, whenever I started this, I kind of assumed there would be, 15 to 20 applications that we would be talking about. And it ended up being 30 that I put on the slides and an additional like 7 or 8 I have mentioned. So I have not used all of these extensively. I have used a lot of these, at least a little bit, just to kind of figure out if they were useful or not for my daily workflow over the past couple of years. So some of you might have questions that I can't answer today, but I will definitely look it up and kind of play around with the programs individually if there's an interest. So the first thing you want to think about is, are you buying Microsoft 365 for yourself, for your household, or for your business? You will notice that I'm going to incorrectly call it by various names. It has gone over name changes throughout the years. Now it is called Microsoft 365. If you had asked me 2 years ago, it would have been called Office 365. But mainly because Microsoft has been gobbling up companies to add to this portfolio, they decided that it didn't just encapsulate the Office program subset, so now it's called Microsoft. You can always buy an individual license, or you can use the free versions, and we'll be going over that in a minute. But basically, there are 4 different subsets of what you can purchase. The first is personal or free. So personal or free is for one individual person. Family is going to be for up to 6 people in your household. So this is kind of nice because it only costs a little bit more than personal for license, and 6 different people can have access to it. And then business is for an organization, and then above business they have enterprise, which is for businesses who want to spend more money, or for a serious organization. If you have a family, you can pay $100 a year and you get 6 licenses. Personal is $70. Business Basic is $60 a year per person. Apps for Business is $100 a year per person. And Business Standard is $150 a year per person. If you notice, it may be kind of small on your screen, but I do have a link underneath where that will take you to a website which will go over what the different offerings have and the prices for them. And we can definitely go over that at the end. The next tier is Enterprise. Enterprise is for larger organizations, and these are billed monthly. So apps for enterprise. So this means that you can download all of the apps that you have for your license. That's $12 a year. E1 is $8 a year, and that's primarily for online access. $20 a year is E3, $35 a year is E5. So remember, that's per person per month. And yep.
Sorry, there's something in the chat.
I don't see that.
Oh, okay.
Was it sent just to you?
I guess so. How is it free and also $70? So I think there was a misunderstanding. I think somebody thought that the personal version was the free version, but that's not true, right?
Yeah, so the personal version is not free. There is, however, a free version, which is in the next slide. It does have some limitations, but for people who basically want Microsoft Word because everyone uses Microsoft Word, you can use Microsoft Word for free. So is there a free version of this stuff? Yes. You can get Word, Excel, and PowerPoint for free online. The next question you're going to ask is, what's the difference between online versions of these applications and the installed versions? And the answer is essentially not much. You do get more with the downloaded and installed programs. They will run a little bit faster and they can handle a lot more data. But if all you're looking for is to edit a resume or to, write a 2,000-page book or to crunch Excel spreadsheets that are way too large to do by hand, you can use the free versions. But once you get into kind of using it for a business, you'll probably want to upgrade. Also for free, you get Forms, OneDrive, OneNote, Skype, Sway, Teams, and ToDo. And we'll go over those in a little bit, but those are all useful. The one limitation is with OneDrive, I believe you get 5 GB free if you don't pay for it. Whereas if you do pay for it in any license, you get 1 TB of storage. You may be wondering, how big is 1 TB? Well, 1 TB is large enough that if you're not sure how big a terabyte is, it's large enough for you, is the way I like to look at it. And roughly 1 TB, if you're doing like high quality pictures and you want to back those up, that'll cover roughly 500,000 pictures.
Wow.
So again, if you have more than that, then yeah, pay for more, but that's more than enough for pretty much anybody. And again, at the bottom of this, I have a link directly to how to get it for free. And the one caveat is you do need to sign up with a Microsoft account, and signing up with a Microsoft account is free, but it is just another login that you have to keep track of. And if you hate keeping track of logins, we always have the class on how to manage your passwords, which I personally like. The next question that often gets asked is, well, what if I have a Mac? And the answer to that is yes, all of these applications, except for a very select few, don't work on a Mac. The main reason why all of these programs, the vast majority of them, will work on any operating system is that a lot of them are cloud-based. So the 2 that are notable that are not cloud-based that you can't use on a Mac are Access and Publisher. Access is essentially if you have an Excel file that is too large and it's really, really slow, you should really be using a database, and that's what Access is. Access also allows you to create applications like drop-down menus and all that sort of thing. Publisher is, we'll go over it in a little bit, but Publisher is basically for if you want to make, you know, a newspaper layout, or if you want to make a poster or something like that, that Word just kind of isn't equipped to handle. That's what you use Publisher for. Its main competitor is Adobe InDesign. So are there any questions about like pricing or tiers or anything like that before we get started into the individual applications?
Yeah, we have a question in the classroom.
Yeah, the subscriptions that I've seen, and then when I got my computer, there was like a one-time install for Microsoft 365, or there was a subscription. So I just bought the one time, and my understanding is it just doesn't update. Is there any, what's better? I mean, well, probably the subscription one where you pay the $99 every year is better, but am I missing out on anything by just buying that one, you know, install at the time I purchased the computer?
Kind of, but not really. So with the one-time install, that's generally retail price is about $149, and that'll get you, you know, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, OneNote, all that stuff for the rest of your life or the life of the program. The program will get updates for security purposes, but Microsoft is they're quickly trying to make people buy and opt into the perpetual license of buying it every year. The main negative with purchasing it outright is just the OneDrive integration. You just don't have that massive 1 terabyte OneDrive, which is cloud storage. I do say that you can get the both the family personal versions for cheaper, not from Microsoft's website. So for example, Costco, you get 15 months for, I think, $70 for the family plan, which is pretty good. So if you purchase it through places other than Microsoft, you can lower that price down a little bit. But the one-time license is perfectly acceptable. It's a one-time, and if you use it for 2 years, you've pretty much made your money back as long as you don't want the OneDrive integration. Word, not going to go over this in too much detail. Pretty much everyone knows what it is. It's the, for lack of a better term, it's the premier word processing software. So you do have alternatives like Google Pages. You do have apps. You do have Apple's standalone, which is Pages, right? I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And you have free versions like LibreOffice. We have a question: did Microsoft change its E1 subscription in the last few months? I don't believe they did, but what could have happened is they could have changed it earlier on, but you were locked into basically whatever E1 was a year ago. Whenever you started paying for it, that's what it's going to be. I believe E1 allows you to do physical applications. I know E2 does, but that's a good question. I can look into that. The next big one is Excel. Excel is the, again, premier spreadsheet program. And this, you can download it and install it on both Mac and PC. Excel has the benefit of essentially being best in class for such a long time that no one's really trying to beat it. So unfortunately, you don't have very many alternatives. You do have things like Google Sheets or Apple's Numbers, but Excel is Excel, and it's pretty much the spreadsheet application of choice for anyone who's actually using spreadsheets. The biggest draw of Excel is its ability to handle absolutely massive spreadsheets, which some of the other applications don't do as nicely. It's also really nice because if you want to do formulas or macros or something like that, there are tons of tutorials online specifically written for Excel. You can also, if you're looking for, a side hustle or a job, if you get your Excel certification, that's a pretty good kind of thing to put on your resume. PowerPoint, again, this is fairly known. It's probably the most the most talked about and most used presentation software. I personally find the Apple Keynote is a little bit easier to use, but PowerPoint is massive. You can take your PowerPoint file to anywhere and you can use it. It's fairly ubiquitous. And again, it's the main thing. Whenever you say PowerPoint, oftentimes people will refer to PowerPoints as any sort of presentation, even if they're not using the application PowerPoint. Access. This is kind of where we get into the less used stuff. Access is basically a huge database management system. And the benefit of using this over something like Excel is it's just far more powerful. Unfortunately, you'll have to use some scripting languages in order to get the full features out of it. But if you want to know how a database works, or you need to set up a database, or someone has said to you, hey, this would work better in a database, just know that Microsoft does have an application for it, and it is very well known. It's massive, and there are tons of tutorials on how to use it. Teams. So this is probably my favorite thing Microsoft has done in the past 5 or 6 years. It's essentially what Slack was, if anyone's familiar with Slack. It has some benefits versus Slack. It has some negatives associated to Slack, but the main benefit of it is it works and it integrates with all of Microsoft's other products. Teams is used for things like video collaboration, like what we're using Zoom for now. It is used for messaging between people. So kind of if you want a more immediate response than an email, Teams is fantastic for that. Teams also has the back-end integration of SharePoint / OneDrive, so you can store files on there for businesses. So Teams was invaluable for companies during the pandemic, mainly because if you were working from home and didn't have access to your files, you could just put all of your files on Teams, and then everyone could resume work like normal. Teams also allows you to use programs like Word, Excel, PowerPoint from within the Teams interface. So if you have files on there and 2 people want to work on it at the same time, you can collaborate, and you can see what everyone else is doing in a file while you're working on it. Teams is kind of a big deal, and it kind of does a little bit of everything. So if you have a business, or if your business has Microsoft products and you aren't using Teams, I would highly suggest at least looking into it. And you don't have to use all of the features. You can use only a small subset and it will still be useful. Mary, how have you progressed with Teams over the past year or so?
Well, it's been a lifesaver at the library because many people were working from home and we didn't have access to our L drive. So we put the necessary files on Teams. Everybody's able to access them easily, and messaging, because I don't know about you, but my inbox with email gets filled up way too full too quickly. And Teams is just a lot simpler as far as quick back and forth, and you can solve something and get it done. So it took us a little while to get used to it, but now we really like it.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add with Teams, and one of its big features for me, is Microsoft has put a lot of money and energy into making its search a lot better. So it behooves me to use Teams, because if there's ever a document I need to find, I can just search, and I can see when people have commented on the document. I can see when people have talked about the document. I can see when I added the document, when I edited the document, where the document is. So it's all encapsulated in one thing. How is Teams like Yammer? Well, we're going to go over Yammer in a little bit, but Teams, one of the funny things is Teams actually has Yammer integration directly within Teams. So you can add Yammer to Teams. So it's not necessarily replacing Yammer, but you can just add Yammer to Teams, and yep, they can talk with each other just fine. OneDrive, so this is the file storage, the cloud file storage application. And I mean, its alternatives are too many to note. You have Box, you have Dropbox, you have Google Drive, you have Amazon Drive, you have all these options. But the benefit of OneDrive is, at least for the price of it, if you buy a Microsoft license, Microsoft 365 license purely for OneDrive, it is incredibly price competitive to buy Microsoft 365 versus just buying something like Dropbox or just buying something like Google Drive, because you get all of the other added things to it. Again, OneDrive is 1 terabyte. If you go over that, you can buy additional storage, or if you're on some business plans, and if you're on the enterprise plans, you can ask Microsoft to give you more storage, and they will. So it's just massive file hosting. Also, if you're using the free version of Microsoft 365, OneDrive is where all of your files will be stored. So it'll be stored not on your computer, unless you install OneDrive on your computer, but it will be installed in the cloud. It'll be saved in the cloud, sorry. So, you know, if your computer dies, you still have access to all of your files. OneNote.
Tim,
yeah.
Joanne here. Can you quickly say a few things about how this difference with Dropbox?
Yeah, so the differences between OneDrive and Dropbox aren't that many. They both do incredibly similar things. Probably the biggest difference between OneDrive and Dropbox is just the pricing. Dropbox, I think, is a little bit more expensive than OneDrive. Dropbox is also slightly better at sharing files with other people, whereas OneDrive really wants the other person to have OneDrive to access the file, but you can just hit, no, I don't want a Microsoft account, and you can just download the file directly from OneDrive, whereas Dropbox will kind of make that a little bit easier for the other person. But effectively, they do the exact same job, and they both do it very well. So there's no reason to switch to OneDrive if you're already happy with Dropbox, but they're both, you know, very, very similar.
Thank you.
And OneDrive does work Mac, PC, and you can also install it on your phones and tablets and other devices, same as Dropbox.
Okay, thanks.
We have a question in the chat. Whenever I say everything is saved to the cloud, is that automatically, or is it something that you need to have set up beforehand? So that's a good question. If you're using the free version of Microsoft 365, by default, it will save everything to OneDrive. And if you are using Microsoft 365 paid, the default save location is OneDrive. But if you save a file in somewhere other than OneDrive, then you'll update your default save location. So the only thing you really want to make sure is that if you want something in the cloud, that you're saving it to the cloud. The other thing you can do with Dropbox is you can tell it to back up Dropbox. So that's its folder if you install it on the desktop. on your computer. And you can also say to Dropbox, hey, I also want you to back up everything in my documents folder. I also want you to back up everything on my desktop. I also want you to back up everything in my pictures folder. So if you install OneDrive on your computer, you can tell it to back up pretty much anything you want. OneNote, I'm definitely of the camp that I don't find OneNote exceptionally useful. It is way too much for what I need a note-taking app to be. But if you're a person who really likes taking notes, who really likes drawing on your notes, or really likes linking your notes to other notes, or linking your notes to other people, OneNote is absolutely incredible. So I've met people who don't understand why they would ever use OneNote. And I've also met people who can't imagine a life without OneNote. The best thing I can say for anyone who's kind of wondering what OneNote is just try it. You can get it free with the Office 365 free version. Just try it out. And if you can take advantage of it, it's absolutely fantastic. And even if you're like me and you can't take advantage of it, I still use it just because it's integrated with all of the other Microsoft products. But you can add notes to it, you can add pictures to it, you can clip your screen and add that to it, you can add audio commentaries to any comments you make on a note, you can add videos into the note. It's absolutely essential for some people. And again, some people absolutely love it and can't live without it. I would just recommend taking it for a spin. Or if you want, you can ask Mary and we can do a class on OneNote. Outlook. So Outlook is the big boy of the email space. For a desktop application, it was one of the first full-featured and actually usable email clients, in my opinion. And it's basically just a application on your computer for handling email. If you use something like Gmail or Yahoo or Comcast email, whatever the heck that's called now, and you're happy with using it online, perfectly acceptable. You don't need to install Outlook. But if you've ever wanted your email experience to have more that you can do with it, then Outlook is a great solution. Outlook also integrates with all the other Microsoft products. So for example, if you get an email in, you can say, hey, I want to view this email in Teams. Or you can say, hey, I want this email to go into a note with OneNote where I can edit it. Outlook is just absolutely a massive program that you can spend years and years and years studying and trying to figure out. Outlook also has enhanced calendar applications. So if you need to do kind of fancy things with calendars or share calendars, have multiple people assigned to one calendar, Outlook is where you would do that. Publisher. So now we're really getting into the things people probably haven't used before. Publisher is for making posters, it's for making newspaper pages, it's for making magazines, it's for making brochures. I mean, anything that you've used Word to do and been kind of annoyed with how old Word feels to try and like move pictures around and stuff like that, Publisher is the answer for that. So Publisher is Microsoft's Adobe InDesign alternative. I'm not going to say Microsoft Publisher is better than Adobe InDesign because it isn't, but if you're already paying for a Microsoft license, it makes sense to at least give it a try. And it can do 90% of what Adobe InDesign can do while being a little bit more integrated with the Microsoft ecosystem. I believe our recreation department uses Publisher, and I've used Publisher in the past just to get a good layout going. And it's fairly easy to use. So it's It's kind of like Word, but with more options or different options. And I'd also recommend just to try it out. Or if you want more information on it, ask Mary for us to give a class on it. Visio. So if you're familiar with creating diagrams, so like workflows, so step 1 leads to 2 step 2s. Each of the steps in the step 2 category can lead to multiple different options. You can do a diagram with that. Weirdly enough, you can also make building plans in it. But it's basically a visual diagram creator. This is really useful if you're like me and you need to do network diagrams. So to explain how the network is provisioned and what physical switches are at every step, you can make notes on it. It's basically just for making really detailed diagrams. If you're not really sure what I'm talking about, you probably don't need to use Visio, but it's a wonderful tool that not that many people take advantage of. So Planner is I'm going to mispronounce this, Kanban board. Mary, do you know how to pronounce that word?
I think,
Kanban?
I have no idea, but I'll find out.
Kanban. Well, it's whatever that word is, board interface. And an alternative that's fairly well known is Trello. Basically, what this allows you to do is it allows you to take a note, add it to what's called a bucket, and then you can set things like, you can say, hey, this was started now and it's currently being worked on, and the due date is in 2 days. You can then share that bucket or just that plan with someone else so they can see how you're doing and what step you're on. It's basically really useful for tracking your progress on things. So it's also primarily used as a team tool. So you would have multiple people who were in the same team or on the same bucket. And then you can see how everyone else's tasks are coming along. Planner is integrated into Teams. So I actually haven't opened the actual Planner application in about 4 years, but I've used Planner. I enjoy it. I find it useful. I find it more useful than, for example, a ToDo app. It has a little bit more integration. Also the fun thing I like with Planner is I have it set up to, if I flag an email in my Outlook inbox, it will automatically add it to my Planner. So then I can just go in there and I have all of that information already in the plan. I don't have to cut and paste anything like that. So it's nice for keeping on track of things. The next one is ToDo. If Planner is a little bit too much, a little bit too much work to get set up and running, then you'll like Microsoft ToDo. This is really good for grocery lists. It's also really good for kind of making lists with other people on your team. If you're working together, you can view it from any device. You can have it send email notifications if someone else adds to your to-do. So it's just a simple yet powerful to-do application. Edge. So Edge is the browser that replaced Internet Explorer, and it is currently in like 4th place to Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Edge. Edge is a good browser now. It's everything Microsoft wanted Internet Explorer to be, and it's free. It's absolutely free if you have a Windows computer. But if you pay for some of the enterprise licensing, you can do things like you can filter block, you can invasively track what your employees do on it. So you can do a lot of things with Edge in the free version. It's a wonderful internet browser. And then if you have some of the more advanced paid features in the enterprise licensing, Edge becomes a little bit more powerful for the administrators. But as a user, it's the same experience.
So Tim, can you explain what filter block means?
Yeah, so you can say things like, you know, this person isn't able to go to this type of web page. You can say, oh, by the way, no one in our organization should have access to Facebook. You can say if there is a, you know, website that they're trying to reach that's in Russia, just say no. So lots of different things like that. Effectively, it allows a organization to have a little bit more influence on the security of the web browsing that someone takes part in. Editor, which if you notice some of the logo for editor is very similar to the color background, which I found fun. And the main difference between editor and just the normal Microsoft word checker thing is it's a little bit more powerful, and it also goes across all of the different Microsoft products. An alternative to editor would be Grammarly. I personally think that Grammarly is still better if you want something that you pay for, but Microsoft Editor is substantially better than the old red squiggly underline that always forgot, you know, that this is a proper name, or it would always say you're in the wrong tense, but you swear you're not. But it is good, it's better, and they've enhanced its grammar checking capabilities significantly. Microsoft Defender. This used to be called Microsoft Security Essentials back in 2010. And you do get Defender for free on your Windows computer. If you have a Windows computer, you have Windows Defender on it. If you buy something like Norton, then you probably have disabled Defender in order to use Norton. And the base of this, the base model of Defender is fantastic, and it is free. However, if you have a business or a high enough enterprise license, Defender gets a lot more capabilities. So Defender would allow you to do things like, again, it would allow you to do the geo-filtering. So you can't have contact with certain countries. You can basically have it monitor for all sorts of network intrusions. It has enhanced ransomware protections. It allows you to kind of see events that have happened on your organization's computers. It's essentially just a really powerful antivirus by itself, and then paying for it gives you a lot of the analytics and a little bit more security that you're able to manage if you have a high enough tier in enterprise. Bookings. So this is a fun one that absolutely no one wants to use. I personally like Bookings. Bookings is essentially a way to create, have someone else outside the organization create or schedule an appointment. So for example, if the library had used Bookings for the rooms, it would do a very similar job to how you book a room now. It basically allows you to see time slots when stuff is available. It allows someone to book that time slot. So basically this would be really useful for a smaller business, like a hair salon or a computer repair place, or just any place that has walk-ins where, you know, like if you're a social services center or something like that, you can set this up so that people can make time for appointments. And it's also nice because then you don't necessarily have to try and fill out your own schedule. You can have other people just add to whenever you're free. So basically you would assign, if you're like in a hairdressing salon or something like that, you would assign each person their own bookings calendar. And then people would automatically be able to book, you know, a 1 hour time slot, or you can do things like, you know, what do you want to have done at this hairdressing appointment? Do you want to have your hair colored? Well, that will automatically make the bookings time be, add 15 minutes. I'll be honest, I have no idea how long it takes to do that, but I'm assuming it takes longer than not doing it. So it allows you to do things like that. It allows people to set up appointments in the comfort of their own home without having to call. It'll also allows you to set up time off for yourself. So you can say, I do not want anything booked at, between 12 and 1:30 on Thursday, and then no one will be able to book that time slot. So it's nice because it allows individuals control over their booking schedule. And it's also nice because it allows corporations to let individual people have that kind of control. So, someone doesn't call in and someone looks at your calendar and says, yes, they're free, but in reality, you had this time blocked off. Bookings kind of takes care of that and automatically blocks off that time. Microsoft Forms, if you are familiar with Google Forms, this is pretty much the exact same thing. Not going to talk too much about it. If you need to make forms, then this is a perfectly fine way to do it. The main benefit of Forms, though, versus using something like Google Forms, is that if you use Excel, you can have it automatically add whatever data someone inputs into Forms into Microsoft Excel just directly. So if you have people signing up for something like, say, a tech, whatever we call this on Tuesday, it could ask for name, it could ask for email to send the response, it could ask for all this information, it could ask for a comment on, what are you hoping to learn? And then people fill out the form, they would get automatically added to the email list and they would sign up for the class. Yeah, one person said, I was hoping our subscription would let us use bookings, but no. I believe you need Microsoft E2 licensing to use bookings. It may allow it on E1. I just know currently the town has E2, so we have access to bookings. Just a quick side note on the pricing that we went over in the beginning. That pricing is very fluid. If you actually go to buy something in the enterprise version, at least, depending on how many people you have, depending on the size of your organization, depending on how nice the salesperson is, you can get a decent discount on the yearly cost for having Microsoft 365. All right, so Microsoft Project. If you know what a Gantt chart is, then you can use Microsoft Project. If you don't know what a Gantt chart is, you can still use Microsoft Project, but it'll be super confusing. So basically, Microsoft Project it allows you to manage people's time in developing a schedule. And the main benefit of using it is if you have a project that needs person A to do something at like step 10 in a project, you can say, okay, person A is assigned to this project in step 10, and it will automatically let that person know whenever step 9 has been completed. So this is really good for, if you just really want to meticulously plan out your day, you can use Project, but it's really useful for businesses in kind of time planning and resource allocation. Skype, it's a Zoom alternative. It was here before Zoom, and everyone's still confused as to why it didn't blow up when the pandemic started. You can use Skype. It's still good for making phone calls, but it's kind of dying. Microsoft bought Skype, and Microsoft has already cannibalized any hope Skype had at being a business tool by introducing Teams, which effectively neutered any abilities Skype had in the marketplace. So it's alive, it's doing stuff. don't expect it to be around in 5 years. All right, Microsoft Sway. If you thought Microsoft, wow, begin with a P. All these names are running together. Anyway, Microsoft Sway, according to the tagline, makes it easy to create and share interactive reports, personal stories, presentations, and more. Basically, what this means is that if you want to create a report, or if you want to do a poster, or if you want to do something of that nature, and you don't want to be bothered with trying to figure out an aesthetically pleasing layout, you just shove all that information into Microsoft Sway. It will pop out what it thinks it should look like, and you say yes or no, and you can edit some things. And then you have a, well, generally decent looking document to print out or to share. So basically it's a set it and forget it sort of thing. I personally have tried it a couple times and I like it. There isn't much in my job description that requires me to use something like Sway, but I find it useful. An alternative would be Canva, but the main benefit with Sway is Microsoft has put in quote unquote AI into it. So it kind of has tried to figure out what an aesthetically pleasing poster or presentation or report looks like. And it will automatically try and formulate whatever information you put into it in a good way in order for you not to have to make those decisions. So I'd say give it a shot. If you don't like it, it only took about 5 minutes of your life to put in the information.
Tim, so is Sway and
Yep.
Canva sort of like InDesign for dummies?
Yeah, so Canva is kind of like you put everything on the page in a way that you want it to look. Sway is more, here are these 5 things, do something with it, and then Sway will kind of put them where it thinks it should. So Canva is more of a do-it-yourself. Sway is kind of a, I have absolutely no eye for design. I don't know what colors go well together. Just please do it for me, and it will pop out a finished project that you can then edit. So yeah, it's nice. Canva does have a little bit more like ability for you to do whatever you want, but again, Sway is for if you're like doing a whole bunch of these at a time and you just you don't have the time to like make each one super individualized, just pop them all into Sway and then you'll get back something that's usable. And with Sway, it does offer collaboration. So you can kind of open a Sway document and say, well, I have the reports. So you put in the reports. Someone else says, well, I have the verbiage. They put in the verbiage. Someone else says, I have this really cool picture. They pop in the picture, and then Sway jumbles all that together and makes something that looks good. SharePoint. So you could honestly get like a 4-year degree on SharePoint. SharePoint is the back end of everything we've been discussing. SharePoint has too many uses to actually talk about them all in an hour. It'd probably take like a week. There really isn't anything you can't do in SharePoint. The main thing I'll say that SharePoint can do that none of the other Microsoft applications can is it's good at making a website for internal use. So, you know, if you need like an intranet, or if you need a place for everyone to go for their HR documents, for their finance documents, for their XYZ documents, SharePoint is really good at that. But you can kind of get away with using Teams for that. So I don't know, but basically SharePoint is the back end of everything. If you're saving a file in OneDrive, it's going into SharePoint. If you're saving a file in Teams, it's going into SharePoint. If you're creating anything on Planner, that's actually being created on SharePoint. So SharePoint is everything, but you never actually need to interact with SharePoint. Stream. This is a quick one. It's like a private YouTube. So if you want to share videos with your organization, but you don't want to share videos with everyone not in your organization, Microsoft Stream allows you to do that. Done. Viva. This is relatively new. I believe it's only like 1.5 years old. And it's automated. It's kind of weird, kind of creepy, kind of useful. But I accurately can't explain what this does. Microsoft tried to make it do too many things. So according to the tagline, it's balancing productivity and well-being. It allows you to connect to knowledge and experts, make learning a natural part of your day, and stay engaged and informed. What this essentially means is it will send you notifications like, hey, you're working too hard, or hey, please take a break. It will say things like, do you want me to book the first 30 minutes of your day for you to catch up on these 500 emails you didn't look at yesterday? It's kind of like an automated personal assistant, but it does a lot more than that. I can't accurately explain all that it does, but it's useful, I swear, if you have the licensing for it. Yammer. So Yammer is really interesting. So I won't go into it, but the history of Yammer as a company is really interesting. It's really useful for large organizations. It's also kind of useful for small organizations, but it's essentially a closed Facebook that allows you to collaborate with people in and out of your corporation if it's set up to allow outside of your corporation. But it's incredibly useful for, especially before Teams was a thing, to allow someone very easy access to try and figure out where to find their HR documents, for example. So Yammer does a whole heck of a lot. It could be its own, 2-year degree, but it's very useful for us, especially useful for Fortune 500 companies. I think something ridiculous, like 80% of Fortune 500 companies use Yammer, and 99% of normal people haven't heard of it. In case you wanted another app that essentially do what ToDo and Planner does, we have lists. I find Microsoft Lists to be fancier than Microsoft ToDo and different than Planner. It's really good at tracking information with teammates, just like the other ones, but it's a little bit better at it. It also looks nicer, in my opinion. It's very slick. Why would you use this over ToDo? You'd have to use it and find out. Yeah, it's simple, it looks good, and it's incredibly useful. But it's real big with collaboration. So ToDo kind of doesn't collaborate as well or have as many features as lists. So if you were looking for a reason to go between ToDo, lists, and Planner, or which one to go with, I would start with lists, just if you have access to it, just because it's the prettiest looking one. It has, in my opinion, more functionality than the others. All right, Microsoft Intune. So Microsoft Intune is basically only useful for businesses. Microsoft does have a family version, which we'll go over in a second. But basically, Intune is a tool that allows a company to manage remote devices. So that's a fancy, or the fancy way of saying that is unified endpoint management. What this means is that if you are a company that gives out phones, you can now use Microsoft Intune to completely manage that phone. What this means, if you're a company that lets people bring their own devices, is you can manage what information from the company is stored on those devices. So for example, if someone, hopefully not, but if someone's phone was stolen and you work in a, and they work in a, in a way that you don't want, they have like security or confidential information on there, you can remotely wipe it. You can remotely say, hey, you have to have a 6-digit password on this phone, or you have to have the phone encrypted. It basically is a program for protecting corporate data. So it's useful. And the benefit is that it's kind of bundled into all this Microsoft stuff. So oftentimes, if you wanted or were looking at MDM, so mobile data management, your company may already have a license that includes Microsoft Intune. Again, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. I've never used this. Teams, in my opinion, probably has completely cannibalized whatever use this had. But this is a chat application that is end-to-end encrypted, and it is apparently good for sending and receiving messages. And to my surprise, it allows you to submit invoices, which sounds nice. So, you know, if you're kind of more of a mobile person for your job or office work, you can use Kaizawa. Yeah. So, yep, you can think of it as like, you know, Microsoft's version of WeChat. Microsoft Whiteboard, just think about what you would assume that application would be, and that's what it is. It's very similar to OneNote in that people can collaborate, but it's a little bit more stripped down, and it's made for collaboration, whereas OneNote is kind of made for individual people with the addition of collaboration. Whiteboard is made with the intent for collaboration. So it's good, it's nice. If you need it, you can use it. If you don't, you definitely don't need to. Here are some others. So the one I want to point out is family safety. Family safety is essentially the family version of Intune. This allows, if you're on a family plan, it allows you to, in a non-creepy way, just trying to stress that, in a non-creepy way, you can tell what people have been looking at on their phone. You can tell where that phone is. You can tell how much screen time they've had. You can also say to your son, daughter, granddaughter, husband, hey, you're only allowed to watch YouTube videos for 1 hour a day, and then it cuts you off. So family safety is basically managing your family's phones and devices, and also tracking the location in case it's stolen, or making sure that someone really is at the library instead of the movie theater. All right, I have miraculously managed to do that before 2 o'clock. So any questions? We can go back over anything. As always, I am scheduled and I have my time blocked out until 2:30. So people can definitely start to drop off if they want to, or if they haven't fallen asleep. And then we can, I'll be around to answer any questions. As always, the best questions are asked or thought of as soon as you leave. If that's the case, just email Mary and she'll get in contact with me, and I will either update the slide with additional information, which she will be sending both the slides and the video to everyone, or I'll just reply in an email. Or if you want more information and we think it would be a good class, we will add that.
There's a question in the classroom.
Yeah, so I have on my laptop Microsoft Edge as a browser, and I do use my email. I have a Yahoo email account. It works fine, so I'm happy with it. I have colleagues that send me calendar shares that, you know, the instructions are for Outlook. So can I like keep my email in Microsoft Edge, but just use the calendar part of Outlook, or will they automatically blend together, or what would happen there? If I just download Outlook, will all my email go to Outlook then, or?
Yeah, so you can set up Outlook and you can ignore it if you just want to use it for the calendar portion. But basically it'll do something, it'll connect, I believe, IMAP So anything you do on your main email account, on your Yahoo account, it would then transfer to Outlook. But you don't actually have to use Outlook for email. You can use it for just calendar if you want.
So Tim, there was a question in chat as well, and then I have a question.
Work computer doesn't have all the capacity in Word, can't access font box for letter spacing. Is this the downloaded version of Word? Because I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't have access to the font box for letter spacing.
Yeah, downloaded version.
I'd have to look into that. I'm not 100% sure.
Sounds like a perfect question for tech drop-in.
Yeah, that is a perfect question. Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Okay, Nisa said the computer is actually a Chromebook, and would that affect anything?
You can't download Word on a Chromebook. So you would be using the desktop application version, or you would be using the Google Play version, which is essentially the web version.
Does anybody else have any questions for Tim right now?
I do. Tim, we have Microsoft 365 for the River Center. It is, you know, we bought it through TechSoup. So I can see from your pricing here that we got a very, very reasonable deal.
Yep.
My question is, what's the longevity of those licenses? Like, do they like time out? Do they get old and not interface correctly? What, how does that work?
So you're talking about for like you did a one-time license?
We bought multiple licenses, probably, I don't know, Nisa, maybe 5-6 years ago. And we're still operating off those. How's that work? Do they just automatically get updated or?
Yeah, so if you go to File and then either Account or Options, I forget which, you can have it check for updates. If they're on a Windows computer, they will automatically check for updates every so often, and they should prompt you to restart the application to install them. If you have a standalone license, which means that you have the non-365 version of the applications, you will be able to use those for at least the next 12 years, just fine. Microsoft, for better or for worse, is a company that really keeps all this legacy stuff alive, which is good if you have a individual license. And basically what that means is your Word, your Excel, all of your programs that you've bought will continue to work as long as you don't want any of the new features added in later generations. So probably for your version, you wouldn't have something like the advanced editor in them, which shouldn't really matter.
Right, half
But,
these things you talked about, I've never heard of. So yes, you're
yeah.
correct.
Yeah, so I mean, you can use that license until far past when it's useful. So there's no need to buy anything else. If you do the one-time thing through TechSoup, you don't really have anything else to worry about.
Thank you.
Oh, and Microsoft is not in the habit of creating a new document format that renders your programs obsolete. So they created the docx format, which was after the .doc format, but both can be used on any version of Word. And I can't imagine that they're going to be moving from the docx or the excelx file format anytime soon.
Great, thank you.
Well, Tim, you have given us so much to think about, and before I ask my question, I wanted to say to everyone, in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing a deep dive into SharePoint versus OneDrive. And then in March, we'll be looking at calendars and the Teams close-up. So, and we can also look at other pieces of what Tim has presented today, just let me know. But how would you, first of all, I guess you try to figure out how much of this you actually have based on your level of Microsoft Office 365, but then how do you decide what to use and what not to use?
You basically wait for a need, and then you kind of realize there's a Microsoft application that you already are paying for that fills that need. So like, I didn't know that I wanted a planner until I found out that Microsoft had something called Planner. I used it and I found it incredibly useful. I didn't know that Microsoft Sway was useful until I realized that I had it and I used it and I found it incredibly useful. So a lot of these things you can find like in the news, you know, it'll say like Microsoft just released an update to just released Viva, and then you kind of learn about what it is, and then you find it useful. But Microsoft isn't very good at saying something like, hey, it seems like you're putting a lot of things on YouTube that you're marking private and then sending the private links to all the people in the corporation. Why don't you try Microsoft Stream? So it's kind of hard to find these programs unless you just see them all listed out like this, to find them and see if they're useful or not, unfortunately. So the way I find out what I have access to is I just go to Outlook online, and then I just click this little button right here, apps, and then go to all apps. And notice we actually didn't go over all the apps because I have a voice and I want to keep it. And you can kind of go through and see what you have access to. So Planner, I don't know what Planner is. Open a new tab, you know, and just learn more. So you just go to top left, click on the Rubik's Cube, and then you can see all of the stuff you have.
So our very own black hole in Microsoft Office 365.
Exactly. And one thing I forgot to mention is compliance. If you are in a organization or you're in a field of work that has where you need compliance, you need a software vendor or a corporation that you're using to sign a document saying, yes, we can comply with this, which I have frustratingly found is incredibly rare. Microsoft does have an entire compliance application that you can go through for that. So like HIPAA, anything like that, you can make sure that you're compliant with HIPAA as an example.
Okay. Well, thank you. I will be sending the slides with the links that Tim put in, as well as this recorded video out to everyone who's registered. And we hope we will see you in 2 weeks for a deep dive into OneDrive and SharePoint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.